Hello, how's it going today? I'm just going to give a little deck tour of my Jorn God of Winter deck. Jorn is a 3-mana 3/3 that says when he attacks, untap each snow permanent you control, which includes all of your snow lands, snow artifacts, and snow creatures. And while this looks like a mono green commander, it actually has a backside that says you may tap it and you may play target snow permanent card from your graveyard this turn if you do it enters the battlefield tapped. Now, in this deck, we're really never going to cast this side. We do have some snow synergies, but we're mainly just using the front side for that very powerful untap ability. But what this does do is this lets us play blue and black as well as green. So this will be a Sultai build. So I'm just gonna break down the rest of the deck, and we're gonna start off with kind of the Voltron-y aspect of the deck. Now, it's not a tremendous focus on Voltron, but we do have some things that will allow Jorn to either attack early or attack late when there's a more developed board. So we have, of course, Swiftfoot Boots and Lightning Greaves. Jorn getting haste is very powerful, especially if we're recasting him later in the game. We don't want to let Jorn sit out for an entire turn, as once your play group sees how powerful this deck can get, they will be removing it. So those two are very important. We have Aqueous Form, again, just allows, well, this one just allows Jorn to swing on a full board. It makes it so that he can't be blocked, and that Scry one is a nice added bonus, but mainly it just is great for making Jorn unblockable. This one is Black Blade Reforged. This can be quite a deadly combo with Jorn. As you'll see later, we have an ability to get quite a lot of lands out with this deck, and Black Blade Reforged will make Jorn into a massive creature that will be very likely to be able to one-shot your opponents with commander damage. This one is Wonder. This deck draws a lot of cards, and we do have some cards that discard cards, but overall, just getting this into the graveyard, it gives all our creatures flying and allows Jorn to swing in more easily. So this next group of cards is kind of our only snow synergies in the deck, aside from our snow lands. So this first one is an older one. It's Sunstone. So it's 3 mana, and we can pay 2 and sacrifice a snow-covered land to have all creatures deal no combat damage this turn. So this is just kind of a repeatable fog, which again, which can be very powerful, especially if you're facing a combat-centric deck. A repeatable fog, and in our case, we're going to have a lot of lands on the field to be able to sacrifice to this. So this repeatable fog can really make it hard for creature decks to attack into us. We have this one, Ascendant Spirit from Kaldheim. Now, this is one of these kind of level up creatures. Now, these first two abilities don't really matter. This one does give it flying and makes it 4/4, but it's this last one where we can pay 4 snow mana and put 2+1/+1 counters on it, and it gains whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Now, what's important about that is that 4 mana ability, whenever this creature deals damage, draw a card part, actually stacks. So if you activate this multiple times, let's say 3 times, you'll have a 10/10 that when it deals combat damage, it'll draw you 3 cards. Now, I know it's a very high mana investment, but believe me, with this deck, especially if you're in top deck mode, you're going to have a lot of mana that you're not using. So this is a very nice card to have when you're kind of down on your luck, and if not, then you don't need to cast it. This next one, Draugr Necromancer. So it says, if a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, you exile it with an ice counter, and you may cast spells from among cards in exile your opponents own with ice counters on them. So this is just a nice, fun little card. You know, you can play it, and it stops your opponent's creatures from going into the graveyard, and it gives you something extra to do with your mana. And this final one here is Merit Lage's Slumber. So I actually don't run Dark Depths in the deck because I don't have a lot of ways to make it tap for mana, and I felt like, you know, I didn't really want to include it. So this is a fun way to be able to play Merit Lage in the snow deck. It says whenever it or another snow permanent enters, you scry one. So this is pretty much just going to help you scry every turn, smooth out your draws, and sometimes you scry multiple times. For example, if you play land and cast Jorn, you're going to get 2 scries out of that. And then once you hit 10 snow permanents, it just turns into a 20/20. Now we're going to move on to the kind of bombs of the deck. We're going to start with Avenger of Zendikar. Pretty self-explanatory. We're obviously going to be playing a lot of lands, and we're going to have a lot of lands, so this is a great way to just, spit out a board that can swing for lethal immediately, almost immediately. And then Emergent Ultimatum. You don't have to include this, and if you want to build something similar, this is, it just allows us to search up our 3 best monocolored cards, and most of our best cards are monocolored, and an opponent chooses one of them, and then we get to cast the other 2. And next we got Hullbreaker Horror. Now, this outlines a very key thing with Jorn, which is that it has flash, meaning if you can cast this if you only have 4 lands on the battlefield. What you do is you attack with your 4 snow lands in play, you swing with Jorn. In response to his trigger, you float all your mana, let the trigger resolve, untap it, and then you now can tap your mana again and have the required mana to cast this. So you can get this out turn 4, and it's the same with any other flash card. Alright, next we have Jadzi. Now, the front side of Jadzi's fantastic in the deck. I mean, there's a lot of instant sorceries, and it has the ability to protect itself by discarding a card, but the backside is really, really quite something. So for 4 mana, it says you may put any number of land cards from your hand onto the battlefield. Then if you control 8 or more lands, you can discard a card and return it to your hand. So you can, with this deck, you'll see later, we have a lot of mass draw spells that are gonna fill up our hand with lands, and this is just a fantastic way to just dump our whole hand of lands. And the fact that you can discard it and return it to your hand means that if you have something like a Tatiova, for example, on the board that draws a card whenever land enters the battlefield, you're going to be able to discard a card, return this, play it again, and play all the lands that you just drew, which can lead to some exponential plays. Next up, speaking of flash, we have our Leyline of Anticipation, which just allows us to do the Hullbreaker Horror exploit with all of our cards, starting the game with this on the field is kind of insane in this deck. It's a great, you can also run Vidal Canori if you like. I just decided to just run the Leyline of Anticipation, but yeah. Alright, so next we're kind of going into the ramp category. We have this Wilderness Reclamation. Again, our deck has a pretty common theme of untapping lands, and obviously these 2 are very powerful when combined. Overall, just a great card in the deck, and allows us to make big plays on our turn while leaving up interaction. Next up, we got Early Harvest. So target player untaps all basic lands he or she controls. This deck runs a lot of basic lands, given that every single land in the deck is a snow land. So this is almost like a take an extra turn spell, just being able to untap all your lands and just go off. It's an amazing card in this deck, and overall, I think this is underrated. I mean, I get that a lot of people don't play basics these days, but holy crap, this thing is insane. Alright, now we got some mana multipliers. I only run 3. We have Mana Reflection, which just doubles all of our permanents tapping for mana. We got Zendikar Resurgent, which doesn't double, but it just adds another mana of that land type, that land produced, which is important because if we have these 2, our lands are only going to tap for 3, not 4. However, with Virtue of Strength, which triples the mana that we make out of our basic lands, with these 2 in combination, all of our lands will tap for 6. This card is probably one of the best in the deck, and the fact that it has this extra adventure attached to it is just the icing on the top. Yes, these are very powerful cards in the deck. Next up, we got some of our big ramp spells. I run 3. So we have Traverse the Outlands. So with Jorn out, it's going to get 3 lands. So 5 mana for 3 lands isn't the worst. But in a lot of cases, if we have, for example, Black Blade Reforged equipped to Jorn, or we have our Hullbreaker, Horror, or whatnot, this can search for many more lands. We have Boundless Realms, so it allows us to search for X basics, where X is the number of lands you control, put them on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Again, just really great. And Reshape the Earth, which is 9 mana and just searches for 10 of any lands. And so what's really important with these, and actually also with these mana doublers, is, normally when you play these in EDH, you tap out on turn 7 and you play this Virtuous Strength. You're immediately the target of the table, and you have to wait an entire turn order for it to get back to you to be able to use it. However, with Jorn, when you swing in, you untap all your lands and you have access to that tripled mana immediately. So picture at turn 7, you have 7 basic lands in play, and you cast this, you swing with the Jorn, you untap, you now have access to 21 mana. You can see how ridiculous this can get. Now we have a little bit more modest ramp. We have this Boreal Druid. It just allows us to get Jorn out on turn 2. Just a standard mana dork, but it is a snow creature, so it does get untapped. We have this Search for Tomorrow. Again, just a way to ramp on turn 1. And we have this Cold Steel Heart. One of the problems with this deck is fixing. And so this is, I believe, the only mana rock, but it is a snow artifact, so Jorn will untap it, and we can choose a color when it enters, which is great because, a lot of times you get your starting hand, and I'll have, swamps and forests, but no islands, so this is a great way to fix in that. We have Uro. Uro's just a overall great card. I mean, there's not much to say here, but again, when this deck can kind of get empty-handed, it's great that you can cast it out of the graveyard and start drawing cards with it. Dryad of the Elysian Grove, kind of one of the all-stars of the deck. It's great that we can play an additional land, but the fact that it makes our lands every basic land type fixes our mana, and again, we're playing a lot of basics, so the mana can kind of get rocky, especially with, some of our spells that demand, multiple pips in the cost. So, great card to deck. Burgeoning, pretty self-explanatory, just a great card, and our hand's going to be pretty full a lot of the time, so this is just a great way to empty those lanes out of our hand. Growth Spiral, again, pretty self-explanatory. Now we have 3 of these untappers. Now, these 2 are snow creatures, so this one untaps a snow land, and this one just untaps a snow permanent, but this one untaps a forest, and first of all, these are just good ramp in general, and with our mana doublers, it has a pretty good effect as well. But we do also run a few land enchantments. So we have 5. We have Overgrowth, which you can pay 3, and when the enchanted land is tapped for mana, you add an additional 2 green. Then we have Fertile Ground. You choose, whenever it's tapped for mana, you add a mana of any color. Utopia Spell, when it enters, you choose a color, and it enchants a forest, and whenever it's tapped for mana, you add a mana of the chosen color. And then Market Festival, which is 4, and whenever it's tapped, you can add 2 mana of any of your choosing. And then finally, Wild Growth, which just enchants any land, and whenever it's tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional green. So, with these 2 in combination, these become very powerful. Being able to untap one of our lands that has these enchantments attached to it allows us to ramp even further, and it's just a nice little synergy that you can bake into the deck. Kind of leading into that synergy a little bit more, we have Underworld Connections, which allows you to tap, or it enchants a land and allows you to tap that land to pay 1 life and draw a card. In general, just kind of good with Jorn. Again, like if we're low on cards, it just means that we can draw 2 cards with Jorn, untapping all of our lands, as opposed to 1 that you'd normally get with Underworld Connections. I've always kind of liked this card. I played it back when, Phyrexian Arena was, out of budget range. But I love playing it with this synergy where you can just tap and untap it, and, these basically just become tap, draw a card, which is, I think, awesome. So now we're on to our card draw. So there's Ancient Excavation. It's a it's an alright card draw spell, but it's just great to have the basic land cycling. And also, if we have a lot of cards in hand, but they're not necessarily the cards we want, this is a great way to just filter through a bunch of our deck and get to what we need. Gravenlore is a snow instant, and it lets you scry X, where X is the amount of snow mana spent to cast a spell, and then you draw 3 cards. So just a nice little snow synergy draw spell. Maybe this should have belonged in the bombs category, but this is kind of a brutal one to get out with Jorn. You can get it out, with 5 lands out. So I mean, potentially, depending if you have the absolute nut draw, maybe like turn 3, you could get out a Jin-Gitaxias. But you could choose whether or not you want to play this in the deck. But yeah, so yeah, Tatyova, I talked about it earlier. Just fantastic in the deck. I mean, obviously we have a lot of lands entering the battlefield. We have a lot of ramp spells, and this just turns that into card draw. We have a couple recursion spells here. We got Regrowth and Colossal Sky Turtle. So you can channel Colossal Sky Turtle to basically Regrowth, and it has another channel ability to return a creature to its owner's hand. That second ability has come up pretty often. I think this card's kind of underrated because you can channel that at instant speed, which, if we have a large graveyard with a lot of instants and we're, not really sure what we want, let's say there's a kill spell versus a counter spell, we can just hold this and regrowth back whatever we want at instant speed to deal with whatever threat we need to deal with. So next up we got some X draw spells. Well, this one's not a draw spell, the rest are, mostly. So Villainous Wealth just lets you, just kind of a fun card, lets you play cards off the top of your opponent's deck, and sometimes you can just exile someone's entire deck with this. I've definitely had games where I just exiled everyone's deck with this card, and it's kind of funny. It's also just fine to play, like, value-wise. We got Blue Sun Zenith, again, can be a win con in this deck, but also, it's just great to sink all your mana into these card draw spells. We got Drowning Dreams, similar idea. Finale of Revelation. This is especially kind of nuts because it untaps 5 lands if X is 10 or more, and also gives you no maximum hand size, which is kind of a bonus, but the untapping 5 lands when you have a bunch of mana doublers or the enchantments on the lands can get kind of ridiculous, and can oftentimes make this spell go mana positive. Stroke of Genius, again, pretty similar. Pull from Tomorrow, same idea. Commander's Insight's nice. I mean, Jorn can kind of get hated out of the game sometimes, so it's nice to get kind of a bonus with one of our card draw spells. So now on to, I guess, our interaction, starting with our board wipes. We got Angaric's Wake, nice flashy board wipe that only targets our opponent's stuff, or only destroys our opponent's stuff. Blood on the Snow, it's a snow sorcery, and it actually can get planeswalkers, which is kind of doesn't really come up that often. But what's important is that most of the time we can actually just reanimate Jorn with this, or whatever our best creature is. So it says, then return a creature or planeswalker card with converted mana cost X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the amount of snow spent to cast the spell. So this is kind of just a way to wipe the board without touching Jorn. This is the best board wipe for this deck. All non-snow creatures get -X until end of turn, where X is the number of snow permanents you control. Again, even if you play this on turn 3, giving everything -3/-3 till end of turn on turn 3 is going to kill pretty much everything, and then later in the game it's going to scale up, and like most of the time this is doing at least -10, if not much higher than that, with Jorn or other snow creatures out, or snow permanents out on the battlefield. So just absolute all-star of a card. Solemn Guard's Command, kind of just a pet card of mine. We can kind of afford to, play a card with this high mana value, and it's got some flexibility, which is kind of nice. Assassin's Trophy, just, pretty standard. He's a pretty good removal spell. Beast Within, again, pretty standard. Arcane Denial for some counter. Oko, because it recently dipped in price and I decided to pick it up. But, you know, it's pretty good with dealing with commanders, and, you know, it's just an overall strong card. Negate, yep, just another counter. Capsize, this can kind of be a win con. If you just have a million mana, you can just bounce everyone's lands. I'm kind of thinking about taking this out of the deck because it can feel kind of mean where you just draw this card and have a billion mana and you're just, okay, I win, you know. But if you're going for power, this is an amazing card in this deck. And then our final non-lane card is Arkham's Astrolabe, which is just costs 1 snow, and when it enters you draw a card, it just filters your mana, which, I mean, it's pretty much a free slot in this deck. It's a redraw, and this deck does struggle with fixing, so it's a great way to fix our mana. We only run 4 non-basics. You can run more or less, but these are just the ones I chose to run. We got Faceless Haven, which taps for colorless, and you can pay 3 snow mana for it to become a 4/3 with all creature types and vigilance. Now, you know, it does hurt that it taps for colorless. You know, we're already kind of struggling with our mana fixing, but the creature land aspect has come up for me a few times, and sometimes in a pretty funny way. I mean, with Villainous Wealth or with the Draugr Necromancer versus a tribal deck, you can kind of get a little bit of a benefit off that if you steal one of their lords or whatnot. Fabled Passage, just a nice way to fix your mana. You can also use, I forgot the name of the land, but the one from Modern Horizons that you pay 1 life and it's a similar effect, except it always enters untapped. Shimmerdrift Isle enters battlefield tapped, and you choose a color and adds a mana to chosen color. Just a good way to fix. And the last non-basic is one of the dual lands from Kaldheim. Now, there is the full cycle of these dual lands from Kaldheim, and there's also a cycle from, I believe, Cold Snap that you can run, but they don't have the basic land types, and they're like, you know, a few bucks. I don't know, last time I checked, so I just really wasn't interested in them. I only run this one because it has the forest land type, which is important for things like, you know, Arbor Elf and Utopia Sprawl. And then the rest of the deck is just basic lands, snow-covered lands, that is. But it's got a relatively even spread with kind of a focus on the green. Yeah. So, I mean, that's the deck. It's super fun, and I mean, you can take this deck in so many directions. It's just basically like having a mana doubler in your command zone. It's super fun to play, and you can go in so many different directions, and I just feel like it's such an underrated commander. So definitely let me know if you enjoyed this video, and let me know if you want to see gameplay of it or whatnot, or if you want to see some other decks. So yeah, thanks for watching.